Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history, and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe, and share. Help build my channel, and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Imagine this: you're looking at a map of the world in Moses' time. Most of the continents are empty wilderness. The Americas, uncharted; Australia, unknown; even much of Europe and Asia remain unexplored territories. Yet according to an ancient Hebrew text, every single island, every continent, every habitable piece of land on earth had already been divided up and assigned, not by human explorers or conquering armies, but by God Himself, in a cosmic real estate transaction that would shape the destiny of nations for millennia. This isn't just ancient mythology. It's a theological argument that claims to explain why certain bloodlines received certain territories, why some nations prospered while others struggled, and why the most contested pieces of real estate in human history were allocated long before anyone even knew they existed. Welcome to one of the most fascinating and controversial interpretations of divine election ever written. This analysis that argues God's promises weren't just spiritual, but intensely practical, involving actual geography, actual nations, and actual bloodlines that can be traced through history. The story begins with Abraham, a nomadic shepherd who received what seemed like an impossible promise. God told this childless wanderer that his descendants would become not just one great nation, but many nations. At the time, Abraham didn't even have a single heir, let alone the foundation for a multinational empire. But here's where the analysis gets interesting. God truly intended to create multiple nations from Abraham's lineage, then basic logistics demanded something extraordinary. God would have to provide sufficient territory for each of these future nations to flourish. After all, it is absolutely impossible that flourishing nations shall exist without national homes. This leads to one of the most sweeping claims in biblical interpretation. Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 8-9, which declares, "When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when He separated the sons of Adam, He set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is His people, Jacob is the lot of His inheritance." Think about the implications of this passage. It suggests that when God was dividing up the earth among all peoples, He was specifically counting how many descendants Abraham would eventually have, and He was setting boundaries accordingly. Every national border, every territorial limit, every geographical boundary was determined not by natural features or military conquest, but by divine mathematics, calculated according to how much space the children of Israel would eventually need. What makes this interpretation so compelling is its scope. This divine land distribution wasn't limited to the small corner of the Middle East that people knew about in Moses' time. Instead, in the mind of God, every island was set apart, and every continent divided. The scope of this cosmic real estate plan embraces within its sweep the entire inhabited and inhabitable portion of the Earth's surface. Imagine God as the ultimate urban planner, laying out not just cities or regions, but entire continents. Every nation that would ever exist, whether it existed in Moses' time or would emerge thousands of years later, had already received its allocated territory. This included every nation, tongue, and people among the sons of Adam, whether they were already in existence or among the forthcoming nations. But here's the fascinating twist: while God was generously providing territory for all these different peoples, He was simultaneously playing favorites. When setting territorial bounds for other nations, God specifically remembered Israel. Sometimes this meant restricting the boundaries of other nations to leave more room for Abraham's descendants. Other times it meant enlarging the divisions intended for Israel to accommodate what the text calls that immense multitude of people when they shall have fulfilled their appointed destiny of developing into many nations. The story takes a deeply human turn when it comes to Abraham's family dynamics. Abraham, now old and still waiting for the promised heir through his wife Sarah, had already fathered a son named Ishmael through Sarah's servant, Hagar. From Abraham's perspective, this seemed like the obvious solution. He had a son, surely this was how God intended to fulfill the promise. We see Abraham's emotional investment in this arrangement. When God finally revealed his plans, Abraham made an earnest plea, exclaiming, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before thee." It's a poignant moment, a father advocating for his firstborn son, hoping that his practical solution would align with God's eternal plan. God's response reveals both compassion and inflexibility. The divine response showed that the Lord was not indifferent to Abraham's earnest appeal, and God even promised to bless Ishmael. But on the crucial matter of covenant inheritance, God was absolutely unmovable. God's message to Abraham was crystal clear: "Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac, and I will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at this set time in the next year." What emerges from this narrative is systematic exclusion. It wasn't enough for someone to be Abraham's descendant, they had to be the right kind of descendant, through the right lineage, in the right way. Ishmael was excluded despite being Abraham's biological son. Later, when Abraham remarried after Sarah's death, he had additional sons through his second wife, Keturah. These sons eventually became the fathers of the Medes, Midianites, and other significant nations. So we can no more reckon these nations as a part of the promised many, than we can those which were formed by the posterity of Ishmael and Esau. If all of Abraham's descendants could be counted among the covenant nations, our task would be an easy one and our story soon told. But the theological interpretation demands a much more restrictive reading. The covenant nations must come only from Abraham and Sarah through their only son Isaac, whose posterity alone can be called, as they are called, the children of the promise, in contradistinction to those who belong to the other families, and who are called the children of the flesh. Perhaps the most dramatic example of this divine selectivity comes with the next generation, Jacob and Esau, the twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah. Here, the author argues, we see divine election in its purest form, a choice made not just before the individuals proved themselves, but literally before they were born. We see in Paul's interpretation from Romans, when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even our father Isaac, for the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth, it was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. This passage presents what might be the ultimate theological puzzle. How can divine love and hatred be assigned before birth, before any actions good or evil? Paul anticipates the obvious objection, what shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? His emphatic response, God forbid. The Apostle Paul, writing to the Romans, makes a crucial distinction: neither, because they are the children of Abraham, are they all national children, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. This leads to a fascinating theological conclusion. According to this interpretation, the election of Jacob over Esau, and indeed all the selections and rejections in Abraham's family line, are purely racial and national, rather than individual and spiritual. One of these two nations which sprang from the same mother is the recipient of national promises, glories, honors, covenants, and service of which the other is not a partaker. What makes this interpretation particularly nuanced is its acknowledgement of moral complexity within the chosen lineage. The Abrahamic nations are not necessarily a race of saints. In fact, some of that nation have been, and others are now, just as wicked as that fallen son of the heavens would have them. This creates a paradox. The chosen lineage produces both the most wicked and the most righteous individuals, suggesting that divine election operates on a different principle than individual moral merit. This theological analysis raises profound questions that echo through history and into our contemporary world. If territorial boundaries were indeed set according to divine mathematics, what does that mean for modern geopolitics? If certain bloodlines carry specific covenant privileges regardless of individual character, how does that affect our understanding of justice and equality? This interpretation suggests that divine election operates on multiple levels simultaneously: individual, familial, tribal, and national, with different principles governing each level. The selection of Isaac over Ishmael, Jacob over Esau, wasn't about personal salvation or individual righteousness, but about which lineages would carry forward specific covenant promises involving actual territory, actual nations, and actual historical responsibilities. It's a reminder that theological questions aren't always abstract. Sometimes they involve maps, borders, and the very practical question of who gets to live where. In a world still grappling with questions of national identity, territorial disputes, and the relationship between ancestry and destiny, these ancient texts continue to offer both insight and challenge to our modern assumptions about fairness, selection, and the mysterious ways that promises made millennia ago might still be shaping the world we inhabit today. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this forgotten biblical story. Leave a like, comment, share and subscribe. This is very helpful. Join me next time for another lost story of our biblical history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.